I'm fascinated with the history of everything, and the history of reptiles is no different. So what did the landscape look like in the 1970s? I've done some research, so you don't have to. Let's talk about the top 5 most common reptiles as pets in the 1970s. My name's Adam, this is Diamond, you're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles, stick around. I started this series with the 1990s because that's when I grew up as a child and I wanted to feel the nostalgia of thinking about all the reptiles I used to see. Now, I was born in the 90s and therefore I was not around in the 70s, but I'm lucky to be friends with guys who were around in the 70s in the hobby, and I did some research, looked at some import papers, and read some articles and kind of gathered what the landscape looked like way back when. And yes, it was way back when. We're talking over 50 years ago. Sorry. Starting off with number 5, we're talking about boa constrictors. Now, this was one of the more, I guess, elaborate or exotic pets back then, where now everybody and their brother has a boa and they're $40. Like, they're nothing. Like, anybody can afford one, anyone can find one. But back in the day, it was mostly stuff that was found, and this is basically, by the way, US and Canada. Like, I love you guys in Europe and wherever. I just don't know. It's easier to find information about the US and Canada, and that's where most of the audience is. So what I was saying is most of the US was proliferated with the species that were able to be found in your backyard, or at least somewhere in the US, and then brought across state lines because there was no issues with that like there is now, or threat like there is now. But a boa isn't from the US. A boa is from Central America or South America, depending if it's BI or BC. So these things have been in the US for a very long time, and Canada too. So it's one of the more exotic ones. And of course, these are good pets, but not everything was taken care of very well back then. A theme that I've seen is everything was kind of kept without a lighting source, maybe in an enclosure that was way too small, things like that. And boas can get, 8 feet, maybe even bigger. So I would imagine that a lot of these boas didn't live the best lives. Like, there are guys who are really interested in the hobby and who are really great with animals back then, but I'm gonna guess that most of these boas did not last very long, and if they did, they probably weren't in the best care that they could have been. Number 4, milk snakes. Now, there is a bunch of different ones. I couldn't narrow down what was the most common milk snake. I imagine in the north and northeast especially, it would be eastern milk snakes. That's kind of what we find around here. I find them all over the place where I live too. And then I imagine that you're gonna get the more exotic looking milk snakes the further south you get. And now, of course, not all milk snakes are found in the US. There's a lot that are from Central America and so on. But I think that milk snakes make a great pet. It would make sense because you can tame them out to be at least they're not gonna bite the crap out of you all the time. Sure, they are a king snake, so they're gonna have a food drive, but that'd be a good thing because I imagine that back in the 70s, or what I found anyway, is there wasn't really a lot of rodent breeders back then. So it's not like you're calling, hey, Bob's Rodents, come and bring me. Like, that's not, you catch your own food for your animals most of the time. And with these guys, you can catch mice, you don't have to catch giant rats. Either way, the point is, it's a medium-sized colubrid that's gonna be a lot easier to house than a boa constrictor. Also, I thought about it, and all the animals from 1970 are probably, even if they lived the best life, are probably not around anymore. Isn't that wild? Time just goes, the years start coming and they don't stop coming, or whatever Smash Mouth said. Let's move on to number 3. Before we continue, I want to say thanks to today's sponsor, Ridge. Making gifting very easy. Father's Day is coming up and Diamond didn't know what to get me, so we got Ridge wallets, matching ones, in fact, because he's a dad also. Whether it's for your own dad or your friend who's a dad, this is by far the best gift. I don't know why we're using the same wallets we've been using for 20 years. Would you use a 20-year-old phone? No, this is the future, and the future is now. Tiny, lightweight, portable, fits up to 12 cards, and all your money in the back, whether you like the strap or the clip. I kind of like the strap now, it's kind of cool. And it fits in your pocket without creating an awkward bulge. That's why this is the last wallet you'll ever need. Thanks, Ridge. So this Father's Day, convince your dad that he doesn't need the dad wallet. He needs this one instead. And by the way, this one's really cool. I like the forged ember, but we've also got carbon fiber and orange. There are 30 plus colors to choose from. So no matter what your favorite is or dad's favorite is, there's gonna be one for you. And it's RFID blocking, so no one's stealing your stuff by a little whoop, whoop on your pocket. And if you like the wallet, you can get a matching key case, which is perfect because I always lose my keys everywhere, but having them very secure in your pocket rather than hanging off your belt loop or hanging off your pants. And if you like them both and want them both, you save 30% by buying them together. With over 50,000 5-star reviews from over 3 million customers, you know you're getting a quality product that is gonna last you a very long time. You can find the best Father's Day gift by using my link ridge.com/WWR. And right now you can save up to 40% through June 15th. That's ridge.com/WWR. So head on over there and buy Dad a wallet and a key case too. Now, back to the video. And that is bullfrogs. We're talking about American bullfrogs, not African bullfrogs, because I imagine that finding African bullfrogs, like why would you bring them here in the first place? Like African bullfrogs were mostly a food item. You know, so American bullfrogs are really easy to find in the US and Canada. They're easily transported. They have a ton of tadpoles. They make good pets because they just kind of sit there. I mean, if I had one, I would love to give it a big paludarium, but I imagine that most people weren't really doing this. I imagine in the 70s, if you had one, you'd keep it kind of in a box or a pickle jar, literally, I read, which is so sad. Because these are big frogs, right? American bullfrogs, they can get over a pound. They're big boys. Not as big as the African ones. Bigger than the loud dart frogs, though. And they would breed like crazy. So I imagine, especially if you had a pond or something, at least there was some captive breeding going on with this species. Because in the 70s, or any time really before the 90s, there wasn't a lot of captive breeding of basically anything. Like, sure, there were breeders that were putting out 4,000 babies a year, but like there is now, not at all. A lot of it was wild stuff. Stuff that was brought in from wherever, right? Like if you live in, say, California and you wanted an American bullfrog and it was brought in from the Northeast, whatever the case is, right? So you're gonna see a lot of that in comparison to now, where if you're someone who lives in, say, New Jersey and you wanted an Eastern indigo snake, it probably wasn't caught and brought to you. It was probably bred, maybe not local, but it wasn't, you know what I mean? Like that's what I'm trying to say is there was a lot less captive breeding. But at least with the American bullfrog, there was quite a bit more captive breeding just by, I guess, accidents, because it was just so easy to breed them. But overall, really cool frog, and you know I have to ruin the list with an amphibian. I don't know why these ones are so loud today, though. Number 2, common snapping turtles. Now, common snapping turtles are everywhere. Like, these things are really easy to find. Even, like, last year, mucking around, like, the woods with Garrett, Reach Out Reptiles in Pittsburgh, and he goes and finds one with his foot in a creek or mud pit, really. So they're everywhere, right? I see these guys. I went on a hike 2 weeks ago and I saw one, right, our little trail of one, that you can find them basically all over North America. So, woo! Of course it makes sense. Now, they're not the best pets in the world. They could be tamed out, but at the end of the day, a snapping turtle is not something that you want to get bit by. And of course, there were red ear sliders that were really common too, but I put those in the 1990s video and I didn't want to double up. But turtles have always been really common, and what's really common, unfortunately, also, is they probably weren't taken care of very well, because up until very recently, we kept turtles in really small pools of water with basically no land area. Now, this is not the right way to keep them, of course, but that's just how things were done, and as we grow as a global community or a bigger community and we can talk to each other better because of things like social media, which I know people say, oh, it ruined the hobby. Well, no, it didn't. It made the hobby a million times better. You guys are out to lunch. But because they had things like books in the 1970s that would never be updated because a book never gets updated, and now we have care guides that can be updated every freaking day. As soon as a study is published, we know about it. We don't have to wait 6 months or a year. Of course, the care is going to be better now, or the information is going to be better now than it was then. There is no argument here, right? And even if we're talking about, 15 years ago with the forums, not the same thing. Now it is everybody knows everybody. We can share information a lot easier. It just makes things a lot better. And that's why our care is better for these animals. So anyway, I don't know what that has to do with snapping turtles, but those frogs are just wild. Number 1. Desert iguanas. This is not something I expected to see on forum after forum after forum, article after article. Now, this is a species that's from the Southwest. You find these in the Sonoran Desert and the Mojave Desert, and that's really cool because they're local-ish, or they're native anyway, to the US. But it's a lizard that gets to, say, 16 inches, something like that. The tail is like 1.5 times the length of the animal. It's an herbivore mostly. There is subspecies, and I couldn't really find the exact species that is the most common. So I just left it at desert iguana, left it kind of vague. But either way, I imagine that these animals didn't last long because they need UVB and calcium supplementation. And in the 1970s, there wasn't really a lot of that. So I imagine that you'd be feeding things that you'd find in your garden, like, I don't know, snails and earthworms and crickets and centipedes and spiders and stuff like that to your pet desert iguana. But at least it's better than green iguanas, which also were prevalent in the 70s. But again, that was in the 1990s video you can watch right here. And I didn't want to double up. So the desert iguana thing really is interesting because I don't see those around now. And it's not something I would ever imagine finding either. So I think that's really cool that they're in the hobby in the 1970s and you don't see them anymore, which is the whole basis of the video, right? And most of these animals you don't see as frequently, or at least there's much more common species like bearded dragons that you didn't find then that you do find now, that were much, much better for most keepers. So I think back then what it was is a lot of native, you get what you can get, what you can find in the wild, that sort of thing. And as we evolve and become a more global community and the hobby grows because of that, you start to see more things that just make more sense, like bearded dragons. So handsome. So there you go. You let me know. Were you around in the 70s, or did you have a story about a reptile that you know of that was kept as a pet? Let me know in the comment section below. And while you're down there, hit like and subscribe. I really appreciate you. And as always, a special thanks to the Patreon supporters. You guys are freaking amazing. Thank you so much. You get one-on-one meetings, discounts on the merch. The sleevelesses are out now. A whole bunch of that and more. And also I'll take pictures of the frogs so you can see them on Patreon. Anyway, and for as little as $1 a month, you get all that and more. And that's it. Because I do videos on Mondays and Thursdays, that means I'll see you in the next one.